If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this, Urban Explorers, what's the creepiest thing you've found/seen while exploring? I live on Long Island and I have been to Kings Park Psychiatric Center several times. There are condos that the doctors used to live in up in the woods, and these are probably my favorite. They're these cookie-cutter homes that are still furnished and complete with antique appliances. There's one house with a red door that has candles all over the floor, satanic symbols spray painted on the walls, and this eerie message leading to the basement. Then Therese, the detention room in one of the main buildings. It features a prison door, a single chair facing a wall, and a chalk scrawling left by one of the patients. It's difficult to read, but it's the patient's declaration that he was framed for stealing sugar and coffee. I live in a small town about 30 minutes north of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Don't ask why, but the town is basically stuck in the early 2000s. The highest tech anyone has is a Wii, basically. So me and my friends were dicking around last summer. There's basically one main road in our town that connects the east and west end, and on this road is an abandoned bank that burned down in the early 1950s. We know this because the first few days searching around it was all fun. We'd bring our ladder from home, and find bank slips in the upper levels. The staircase had been gutted. The vault itself was still intact, but it opened into a large room. Nothing really creepy. The basement though. The basement was this cesspit where it seemed no matter how bright of a light you had, nothing could keep it bright. There were mattresses and needles on the ground, which could have been heroin junkies, I think. But as you moved inward, it got steadily creepier and creepier. Graffiti on the walls gave way to razors lying on the ground, and the room seemed to stretch on beyond belief, still that pitch black. Finally, I heard some scampering in the walls, and me and my friends decided to turn back. Have you ever seen a group of 4 17-year-old guys trying to pretend they're not turning back because we're scared? We started talking about how we had to head home for lunch, this is important, soon, and we slowly started walking back. This is the creepy part. A huge gust of wind slammed the door shut from the top of the stairs. Remember, the building was basically gutted. We raced to the top, and when we got out, it was pitch black. In Wisconsin in summer. At least 9 p.m. We asked our parents, and they said we were gone all day. I don't know what happened, and only one of us had been doing any sorts of drugs that day. I don't know what happened. There are a few abandoned asylums in Maryland which were abandoned quite quickly after they were ruled unlawful and shut down, or something like that. One of them is right near an NSA building. Of course you're not allowed to be on the property, as it's really not safe. About a third of the buildings are literally actively falling apart. Getting onto the property involves hiking through the woods and dodging the cars they send out to patrol the perimeter every once in a while. The place is creepy as all hell. I've been to plenty of abandoned houses and warehouses and other buildings in my time, but nothing is as unsettling as an asylum. My friends and I snuck in there a few times when we were all about 19 to check of the building and down to a grassy hill and some forest. A bit unsettling but pretty cool. That spiral stone staircase also leads down to a basement. A dark basement. There's a door missing from its hinges and a single window, but they don't completely illuminate the basement, which is just flat, musty concrete. But there's another room down there. We didn't dare to venture too far into the dark basement the first few times we went, but eventually we got up the courage to check it out. Flashlights on, we marched into the big concrete room and walked to the door in the dark corner. We opened it up to reveal a small room, about 8'x10, with nothing in it but a big, flat steel table at waist height, about 7'x4, and a bunch of huge metal hooks bolted into the ceiling. I'm sure I speak for everyone involved when I say that the hairs on my neck and arms had never before been so erect. After the initial shock wore off, we looked around the room a bit more, just trying to imagine what had gone on in this little room. Then a clattering sound, metal on concrete, came from behind the door on the far side of the room. We bolted out of there as fast as we could, running away from the chapel until we could see the whole thing. 2 guys are fidgeting with some pipe outside the building next door. One of them sees us and calls out, and 2 of our friends bolt. Turns out they were as surprised as we were to see someone else there. They were stealing metal to sell to a scrapyard. Made me feel a lot better, until we returned later that night. Climbed up on the roof of one of the buildings to smoke, just hanging out and chatting, until a break in the conversation leaves it quiet enough for us to hear voices. We fall silent. Every few minutes, we hear what sounds like a party, just on the edge of the silence. Didn't want to meet the kind of people who party in an abandoned insane asylum at night. Noped out quick, sprinted back to our cars through the pitch black woods, and haven't been back since. In my early 20s, my friends and I would go explore an abandoned town called Padova City, or Tranquille, near Kamloops, in British Columbia, Canada. The entire town up and left one night, really suspiciously in the 1950s, and left all their belongings there. There is an entire network of underground tunnels under this town that connects all the buildings: asylum, school, laundry house, residence houses, dining hall, etc. Apparently they did experiments on people, like trying to connect an arm where their leg should be, and then stored the mutilated dead bodies in the tunnels afterwards. But the tunnels are a story for another time. Some people think this town was a secret military base because it was right between a river and some train tracks. The town was its own isolated covert operation. This place is now haunted AF and has all sorts of creepy paranormal events going on. I could tell you many stories about all the times we explored. We had to be careful though, because the groundskeeper would try to catch trespassers and shoot us with a hacky sack gun. Anyway, there was this huge old asylum/psych hospital that had been converted into a tuberculosis hospital before abandonment. One time me and 3 friends went into the abandoned asylum and started walking down the main hall on the first floor. There were nail/scrape marks on the walls that peeled the wallpaper down in a creepy way, like someone was trying to claw their way out of there. There were old rag dolls and kids' balls left in one room, with a few aged wooden blocks. We got the feeling that we were being watched. All my hairs were standing on end. We kept walking past one creepy room after another. I was walking in the front with all my friends walking in a line behind me. All of a sudden we heard this really loud hiss sound, almost like the sound of a ton of air being released from a hose, really quickly. It came from the room just in front of me to my right. We were about to walk past the open door. It scared the shit out of us, so I started reeling backwards into my friend. We all turned on our heels and ran out as fast as we could. It honestly sounded demonic at the time, but it's possible that a wild cat, like a mountain lion or something, could have been in one of the rooms and hissed. Either way, something was warning us to get out and we were too scared to wait to see what it was. I have other experiences here, but they are more paranormal in nature. This one story was the one that left me questioning what that hiss was. We were definitely not alone in there. Anyways, after exploring that place on a handful of occasions, I decided to never go back there again. That place haunted me for years. It's been around 6 years since I've been there and I'm planning on never going back again. That place is infected with evil and I don't want to get mixed up with it again. When exploring in an abandoned house with a couple of friends one night. The top floor was being renovated, prior to being abandoned, but the rest of the house was pretty well kept. The first bedroom was empty except for a few saws hanging up in the closet and papers strewn on the floor. The saws were weird, but we figured other kids might have been there previously and put them there to up the creepy factor. Second bedroom had a bed with, I shit you not, shackles attached to the posts and a steak knife in the bedside table. On a desk in the second bedroom was a map of the tri-state area with a lot of bizarre marks on it. This all seemed creepy to us, but not creepy enough to make us leave, so we kept going. In the kitchen we found a notebook with most of the papers ripped out and a couple entries which seemed to be written by a hospice. They read along the lines of came back to find she put all the forks and knives in her bedroom drawers again. Ants everywhere but no food. To the end entries which were more like she will no longer cooperate. I cannot do this anymore. I cannot. Some of the pages had gotten wet over the years so we couldn't get full sentences, but some of the pages were just names and weird phrases repeated over and over. I cannot remember any of the phrases unfortunately. Headed down to the basement and was hit with the most foul smell we could ever imagine. It seemed to be coming from the 5/6 metal drums all clustered in the center/back of the room. They were all leaking so we didn't get very close to them, but even staying a good distance away our eyes still burned from the smell. Next thing we know it sounds like someone huge is running from the far end of the house to where the top of the stairs for the basement were. We all start screaming and get out as fast as we can, only to end up standing with everyone in the overgrown yard about 30 feet from the house and listening to the entire place come to life with loud bangs, doors slamming and what sounded like shattering glass. Went back another time in the daylight and nothing happened, but we stayed far away from the basement. I still wonder what the hell was kept in those metal drums. So my friends and I were a little drunk and decided to explore this old abandoned hospital. This was a really old hospital. The psych ward itself was creepy. There were still cuffs hanging from walls. A room that still had padding on it, although the padding was torn up. There was just an eerie feeling in that area. We kind of felt like someone was with us, but there was no one there. We just shook off that feeling and decided it was paranoia. Well, some of the hospital is gone, so in one part of the psych ward, the wall is missing and it's just an open area outside where part of the hospital used to be. That's when we noticed the incinerator out in the open. Well, we decided that we should explore the incinerator. Stupid on our ends. There were thorn bushes around the door of the incinerator. We tore it down. I climb in first and it's very dark. I had a flashlight but didn't really see anything. Well, the floor was squishy and around the time I noticed it, it kind of collapsed and I fell down. I got back up and my friends got in and we shined our flashlights around and that's when we realized the floor was ashes. So I basically fell in ashes. No idea if they were actually dead people's ashes. I was covered in ashes. Head to toe. There were black widow spiders in the incinerator. There were bones. Though, I believe the bones were not human. Some of the skulls were animal. My friends said they were human bones but I really have no idea. One of the bones looked like a femur. I might have a picture of all the bones we found because they took the bones with us when we left, I don't know why. They're EMT so maybe just cause they're in the medical field. Anyway, so that eerie feeling comes back that someone else is out there. So we're freaking out. There was whispering and weird noises. We could hear tapping. It got really cold really fast. And this was a hot humid summer night. It was 85 degrees. We were in heat warnings and it was suddenly really cold when we started hearing weird noises. We killed the flashlights and slowly made our way out of the incinerator, in the dark so that if other people were there, they wouldn't see us. We left as soon as we could. It was just a gut feeling that we weren't alone. I had to take a shower to wash the dead people ashes off me. I was exploring an abandoned school near some woods with my buddy. All was going just fine, had seen a few things and there was even a red smear. OFC, this was our third time or so and we thought this was gonna be a normal thing. This is where shit hit the fan though. We heard some footsteps from above us, but it was faint so we just thought it was our echo. It was 5 or 6 stories tall. Anyway, we go up to the 4th story when we both stopped for some reason and we heard breathing. Oh. Duck. I had a pocket knife on me so I brought it out and the small click echoed through the hall and we didn't hear breathing anymore. Probably our echoes, that seemed casual at this point. We go a few steps forward until we hear breathing again, but it was closer. This is when my dumbass said something along the lines of I know how to defend myself. The dark room near us had footsteps coming from it with the breathing again. Yeah, we booked it out of there after seeing a good-sized figure, maybe a bit taller than me but I don't really know because we saw it and ran immediately. The footsteps didn't follow but my buddy reminded me about the red splat as we ran and we picked up the pace until we were out of there and halfway to our car. There is an abandoned sanitarium outside of Kamloops, BC. I believe it was used to house tuberculosis patients and the mentally ill, not sure of its history. We decided to go take a peek on a day off of working in the bush. Mainly it seemed like a lot of hobo nests, piles of heroin needles and for some reason an incredible number of Popeye candy cigarettes. There were gigantic bathtubs, ice baths, and sinkless, incredibly narrow bathrooms. Found out later it was abandoned due to asbestos, so we all felt real smart in retrospect. There was a room off of the kitchen which was emanating a very strange smell, but it was pitch black despite the rest of the kitchen being pretty well lit by sunlight. All you could make out inside was kind of a shapeless mound. I sure as shit wasn't going in there, so I stuck my camera through the doorway and snapped a few pictures with the flash. Upon inspection, the mound was actually a lightly mutilated, dead sheep, completely covered in rat shit with satanic paraphernalia scattered around it. I think it's around then we decided our adventure was over. Wish I still had the photos, but it was in 2005 and the hard drive they were on crashed. Wasn't a new area to me, actually very familiar. Moreover, what happened there was what made it creepy as hell. Me and my mom were taking our dogs out in rural Lapland and we usually make pretty long walks, especially during the summer as the sun doesn't set so it's nice and bright throughout the night. We walked the main road for some time and decided to go to a field owned by one of our relatives. It's a small country road with a lot of small hills and bumps, barely accessible with a car. The forest around it is very dark and thick. It was a particularly warm day, but once we hit that small road it got noticeable colder and we both noticed it and talked about it. Our dogs are 2 big German shepherds, both trained in tracking and security. If there are any animals anywhere close, our dogs will immediately pick the scent and start sniffing the air or the road, but not this time. They didn't smell anything out of the normal. We get to the field, which is pretty big and open, and right on the left side when you enter it is a small wooden storage house of some sort which isn't really used anymore and it has a lock on it. I was looking at the ground while talking and straight out of the blue both of our dogs stop, like facing a wall a few meters outside the house. We stop and I immediately follow up my dog's body and look where they are staring, and it's directly at the storage house. At pretty much the exact same moment there is this loud, weird, scream or a growl, that I have never heard before. Without saying a word, both me and my mom do a 180 turn and start running. Our dogs follow immediately and take the lead. Only thing we said was what the duck was that before reaching the main road, and I can assure you I have never ever ran that fast in my life. My mom is from that area, and I myself am used to the sounds of animals and know exactly how they sound. Neither of us has ever heard anything like that before. The fact that our dogs didn't growl, bark, or make a sound, or get a scent of any sort is what made it extremely creepy and terrifying for us. Even their tails, or hair didn't get up, only thing they did was a dead stop and stare at the shed for the split second before the weird sound. We went back home, got armed up, and took the rest of the men from the house and went to check it out what it was. Got there, opened the door, and nothing. No tracks of any sort, no nothing, just a typical empty storage house with some hay in it. No signs of anyone sleeping or resting there, no imprints in anything. The sound did come from the house, but to this day we have no idea what caused it. I'm 100% positive it is not a single animal that lives there, because the sound was so different and weird. It was also very loud and somewhat aggressive sounding. The weirdest thing is the way our dogs reacted, or the fact that they didn't have a normal reaction what they would if faced by an animal or a human. The whole incident still gives me the creeps. I've been to this place a few times, always at night, but the first time was the creepiest. At an old abandoned hospital in Maryland that at one point functioned as a sanatorium. The place consisted of around 20 buildings on a huge campus with two giant buildings. One was the children's hospital and one was the adult ward. There was also a building with a huge smokestack. I'm sure it was only a trash incinerator, but it was still creepy. Both of the big buildings were boarded up, but we found a small hole in one of the basement doors to the children's hospital. I walked around the basement but couldn't go above the first floor because the floor was rotted out in places. Walking around on the bottom floors at night with just a flashlight was exceptionally eerie. There were still school books on the ground in some of the rooms and the occasional extremely worn out toy. I was already pretty creeped out when I reached the end of the very long hallway and saw that I had reached the end of the building. In the room at the end of the hall was the morgue. I had the worst feelings of dread from being in the morgue that had held thousands of bodies over the years and knowing that the only way out was all the way back through the building. I was sufficiently spooked and decided to leave. I eventually make it back out of the building, but my friends and I wanted to look around at some of the smaller buildings. There was a row of what looks like little apartment buildings for the staff about 100 yards away we headed to. Between the hospital and the apartments there is a small playground. The smokestack was casting an imposing view over the playground. As we walk through the playground there is a slight gust of wind and I completely froze in my tracks. I heard the distinct sound of a little girl laughing like she was playing on the playground. I promptly shit my pants and ran away. The next time I went, my friend who had just graduated film school brought his camera to shoot some stuff while we were exploring. It was a fairly new camera and he had been filming with it earlier that week. When he tried to look at the footage after we left, it was just blank and the camera wouldn't work after that. That place is creepy. Some friends and I were exploring two abandoned mobile homes above our campsite. The first one looked like someone had just up and left suddenly. There was mail on the counter from 10 years previous and the fridge was still full of food. The smell was terrible. It took a ton of courage to even go down the hallway to the bedroom. After we explored the trailer we moved on to the second one, which was locked. I decided it could have just been an old man out for a walk with his dog, but there was something about the way he was watching us that just felt off. Needless to say, we did not go back to the trailers again. There's a quite big park near us with lots of trees and woodlands. When we were about 15 we decided to camp out up there, as we had done a few times before. In the middle of the largest field there is a circle of trees. The nearest next set of trees is about 100 meters in one direction and about 250 meters in the other. There were 5 of us that night and it was around 1 a.m.-ish. We were expecting a couple of other mates to pop up. One of the lads commented he saw someone coming out of the tree line about 100 meters away. We assume it's our mate and see them walking towards us. We stood there watching and this thing and what looked like a dog just kind of floated past us. None of us could see the legs on what we thought was our friend and there was zero sound underfoot, which is really weird because the ground was sodden and you would easily have heard someone moving at that pace. Whatever it was floated past us. We lost sight of whatever it was for a split second and all run to the edge of the circle of trees to see what was going on. We looked out and whatever it was had just vanished. The thing is, in the 2 or 3 seconds it took us to get a better vantage point, it is flat out impossible for this thing to vanish. It was a clear field for at least 150 to 250 meters. The thing was just gone. Fast forward about 20 years, I bumped into one of the lads and I said to him, "Oi Jamie. Do you remember the one time we camped up the manor and quick as a flash he went and the ghost? None of us were drinking. None of us doing drugs. I honestly don't believe in ghosts, but I flat out cannot explain what that was that night." Once in Dundee, Scotland, me and a few friends went into an abandoned children's mental asylum. The story behind the asylum is that the head doctor who worked there went crazy and tried to burn it down, hence why it is now abandoned. Anyway, we were in there for a good while. There was graffiti around and broken glass, furniture and the such. We came across the canteen, which had them benches that had seats attached, just scattered around the room, and handprint paintings all over the stone walls from the children, which was creepy as it is. But we keep walking around and I head into a room wandering off on my own and take a look around and see lots of old paperwork laying on the floor, medical records, etc. But then by the time I'm done I realize all my friends are gone, so I freak out at this point. But I look outside and see all my friends had ran out. I'm assuming to try and duck with me, so I head back out. As I walk back past the canteen, I look in and see that all the tables had been set up neatly in rows like I imagined they would have been when it was a working asylum. Obviously I was a bit freaked but knew it'd just be my friends trying to mess with me. Then I get outside and I'm all like, "Oh, nice joke guys, etc." and none of them have a clue what I'm talking about, adamant that it wasn't them at all. But obviously I'm like, "Right, okay, but I know you did." Anyways, that was years ago, and recently me and one of my friends were talking about it and he still is adamant it wasn't them, which freaked me out more than when it initially happened, because if it was them, he'd have admitted it by now. So it's not something that freaked me out so much initially, but years after. And for anyone that's interested in the story, it was the Strathamartine Asylum. Really interesting history. As teenagers we would go to this abandoned mega church called Lek. Because it was creepy, abandoned, and it was something to do in Oregon as a minor on a weekend night. To be honest, it was always pretty eerie. Things that were scary there: squatters, massive mural of Satan in the Grand Hall, empty pool with a bunch of old children's toys in the deep end. It was private property and police would almost always come if you used flashlights/phones. The entrance to the maintenance tunnels that used to lead to the old insane asylum. And last but not least, 2 padded rooms in a remote/difficult to access part of the building. Yes, padded rooms in the church, not the mental hospital. One night I decided to take a few girls with me, but instructed my buddies to get there 30 minutes earlier to give us all a good scare, wear masks, laugh in the dark, chase us, etc. It sounded like a harmless idea at the time. So after sneaking our way in, and wandering around the entrance, in complete darkness, we get to the giant mural of Satan and there are about 50 lit candles underneath the mural. Naturally all the girls freaked out and wanted to leave. Even I was a bit creeped out, but I knew it was just my friends. I went up to show them the padded rooms, cause like, why did this church need/have padded rooms? We climb up to where they were and there was about 4 sleeping bags in each room and there was a cigarette still smoking on the ground next to them. I told the girls we had to leave immediately, unsure if this was a part of my buddy's plan or not. On our way out all the candles had been blown out and we started to hear crying from about 2 or 3 different voices coming from one of the classrooms in the building. We hauled ass back to the car and I called my buddies. Turns out they got too high and didn't want to make the drive that night. I have no idea who was there with us and or what they were doing. Rockwood Psychiatric Hospital. We had slipped in the hospital at night to avoid being seen and our plan was to set up hammocks, spend the night and then do a proper explore in the morning when we had light. We called it a night around 3 a.m., setting up hammocks in some kind of kitchen on a 3rd floor. It was dead silent in the old asylum. 2 guys were sleeping on the floor in the gymnasium to the left and my explore partner and I had our hammocks in another room. As is to be expected, I was having a terrible time sleeping, so I would fall asleep, wake up and so on. At one point in the night I heard footsteps coming from the right side of our room. They were heavy and steady footprints. I was 100% certain this had to be a security guard or possibly one of the guys in the gymnasium. The footsteps continued and stopped at the doorway into the room we were in. So certain was I that we were about to be caught I was waiting for a voice, or a flashlight to shine in the room. I opened my eyes from under my hoodie, turned my eyes over to the door and there was nothing there. In the morning, the other guys said they had not left the gymnasium where they were sleeping. Research on the Rockwood Asylum shows all kinds of stories from past employees who all hated working the overnight shift because of the shit they heard in the hallways at night. My friends and I explored this abandoned asylum that also used to be a TB hospital, in Connecticut. We brought this glow-in-the-dark spray paint, and just sprayed a little dot every 50 feet or so, because we definitely would have gotten lost. This place was creepy as hell. I almost fell down an empty elevator shaft. Despite the spray paint, we still got turned around. We ended up in a basement area, and my friend opened a door when we suddenly got hit with the worst smell ever. Which was surprising because we had filtering masks on because asbestos/lead paint. But the smell was rank, and for some reason we looked for the source. We found a dog carcass left a bad taste in our mouths because 1. It was a doggy and 2. The dog looked absolutely mauled. Dog blood all around it, stomach open, and a leg detached. Worst thing I've ever seen in person. At this point we were like, let's get the duck out of here because someone or something killed the hell out of that dog, and by the time we found the spray paint dots again, we realized that one of the dots was completely smeared and you could see a handprint in it. Of course at first we were like, alright, which one of you is pranking us and smeared the paint, but when we quickly realized that none of our hands were glowing with spray paint, we ran out of there and out of a window faster than I've probably ever ran before. I live in a small town in a relatively secluded section of it. One of my favorite things to do is explore the woods in the area. Deep in the woods one day I found a small house about 5 or so miles from the main road. I hadn't come across it before, but I didn't think much of it as there are many abandoned buildings in my county and a handful in the woods I tend to explore. I stepped into my new find and saw some stuff that creeped me TF out. There were pentagrams on the walls, but not graffiti. Carved. And like I said, 5 miles from the road and 7 from my house. Kinda far for some edgy teenagers to go to when there's one down the road. There was also a no trespassing sign outside that I ignored, and I found out soon it was not just a leftover sign from the last owners. I walked into a few other rooms. Mistake. A guy, 30 or so, sick looking, with cuts on him, was sitting on the floor in his underwear. There was a dead raccoon next to him, but I didn't see anything else because I ran full sprint about halfway back to my property. I was so ducking spooked I forgot that I had my damn 9mm with me the whole damn time. I don't think he saw me, but I haven't been that direction in the woods since then. There's an abandoned house on a main road near where I live that a friend and I decided to visit. It's completely falling apart but otherwise untouched by humans. The back deck is missing all the slats and it's a 10 feet drop onto the bottom patio under it. We tightrope the slats and make it onto a part of it covered in dirt. Feeling safer on it we continued, slowly, on the dirt with only a foot or two left to go when my friend's foot falls through and I catch him. We continued into the first room after recovering. There was a mid-60s looking fridge half blocking the doorway, so we squeezed through. After making in, I realized this place must have been a doctor's office, or something. There was an eye wash station, sink, lots of filing cabinets and stuff. After looking through the room, which was half open to the outside, and gearing up with respirators, and gloves, we get to the first door. Carefully opening it and leaving it open. We entered the first hall. I was recording this on my phone. After 15 feet there was a tiny and steep staircase that led to the basement. It was pitch black. We didn't enter due to the very creepy, "Watch your step" sign. Continuing down we enter the front door area right by a staircase to upstairs. About to go up, we notice one small room on the left and we walk up to it. We get to the open entrance to the room and peek in. I noticed a huge hole in the ceiling in the far corner of the room, which continued into a similar hole right under it on the floor. Then we hear something. Up until now we believe we're completely alone, but I hear something and look to the sound and see a black streak. It ducking gobbles and starts running at us. My partner yells that's a turkey as we run and it chases us down the hall. We get down to the end and my partner goes back into the initial room, but without realizing, I run out the broken down wall right ahead, not realizing there was a 10 to 15 feet drop onto some broken glass. Clutching onto the side standing on a 1-inch ledge, I stand there holding on as tightly as I can. The turkey ran right past me and flew away, later realizing, turkey vulture. My partner grabbed my hand and I jumped back onto the platform. We left and didn't come back for a while, until my friend/partner duct taped a GoPro to an RC car on a string, which we drove down the hall and ran into the turkey again. We left again. Coming back for a final time, me and a different buddy went in, on the same route as first. Armed with a filing cabinet drawer we went in, and the turkey ran at us, again. So we tossed the drawer at it, missed and ran. Never been back to that place. Been to others though. Okay. This is an interesting story. Fairly close to the house I grew up in sits an abandoned elementary school. It hadn't been in operation since 1967. In 2007, my band was looking for a location to take photos and I let them know about the school and everyone was intrigued. We planned a trip to scope out the place and see what it has to offer. I had never been in the school before, I'd only heard about it. None of us knew what to expect. When we got there, the place was overrun with ivy and wildlife. Since the front door was locked, we had to climb in through a back window that was broken. We all got inside and begun to spread out to examine the area. Nothing really creepy. Just an old building that had seen its fair share of squatters and garbage dumpers. There were about 6 classrooms altogether. Some were in better shape than others. One room had a 4-foot wide, 3-foot tall pile of old roller skates. We thought that was odd. There was an old nurse's station with a medicine cabinet that had very old ointment in it. Sure, there were a few cat skeletons and dead birds, but we weren't bothered by it. We even saw 2 feral kittens running around and trying to avoid us. We were pretty satisfied with the trip and were about to leave when we found a room that none of us came across yet. It looked like another classroom, but this one had a small door inside. About half the size of a normal door. We opened it and were presented with stairs going down into a dark area. We had phones and flashlights and we soon found out that it was the boiler room. Along with the standard stuff you'd find in a boiler room, there was a long corridor that seemed like it went on forever. At the end of it was nothing. Just a wall. Nothing else. So, we decided to leave since we saw what we came to see. Right as we left the boiler room, I saw a small box on top of a plastic barrel. I opened the box and inside was an incredibly old Polaroid camera. I thought it was cool and I hung onto it. I was so excited about the find that I didn't realize that I had left the door to the boiler room open. We closed up the doors to the school to make it look like we didn't disturb anything. We got back into the van and were about to leave when I took the camera and pointed it at my guitarist, Pete, who was driving, and pretended to snap a picture. Only it wasn't pretend. Not only did the flash go off, but an old Polaroid picture slowly slid out of the camera. We were shocked to say the least. Amazed by what had just happened, we decided to take a picture of the front of the school from the van. Everything seemed fine until the next day when we went back to take the photos. We had brought a couple of other people with us this time. While we were giving them the tour, we decided to show them the boiler room. When we arrived at the front of the small door, we were presented with a horrible sight. The 2 kittens, who were alive and well the day before, were dead, right in front of the door. The door that I had left open. But not just dead. Rotting and crawling with maggots. The smell. I'll never get that sight out of my head. However, we didn't let that stop us. We proceeded to take our photos and did our thing. Then we remembered the camera. We showed the new people the camera and they were amazed that it still worked and that it had still working film. We showed them the photos we took with it. Everything was alright until we got to the photo of the school. We had closed up the school. I know we did. We had to, so that no one would be suspicious and prevent us from visiting again. When we looked at the photo of the school again, the front door to the school was open. Wide open. We just looked at the picture with our mouths open. I couldn't believe it. It seemed so unreal that I still have trouble believing it. Being the skeptic that I am, I decided to recreate the photo by taking another picture with the camera from the same vantage point. This time the doors were closed. I can't explain anything that happened. It creeps me out to this day to think about it. We once sneaked into this weird building out east on Long Island, NY. It was fenced off, but it was definitely one of those places that every teenager eventually sneaks into. It was in large complex of several buildings, some of which might have still been in some use, but this was so long ago I don't remember a lot about the place. I was definitely high as duck. Anyway, one of the buildings we got into had a concrete staircase that went way underground, and opened up into a long hallway with individual cells, small 8 by 8 or 10 by 10 cubes with secure doors, mostly busted open by now, looked like a sci-fi mental institution. Each of the rooms had different color walls painted inside, some were crazy patterns like zebra striped or color splotched. Everything was faded and moldy, and the rooms were filled with the detritus of several teenage visits, beer bottles and cigarette butts, food packaging, etc. One of the rooms though was locked, and the door hadn't yet been. Any homeless individuals, but didn't seem to be the regular haunt, just an extra place to camp in the cold. There was a lot of shit everywhere, except the toilet, which was filled with paper for some reason. Old board games, torn books, sleeping spots, clothes, mostly things you'd find in areas that are camped in by homeless people. As we were walking down the stairs from the 3rd floor, there was a man walking up the stairs talking on a cell phone. We stopped, he stopped, we ducked into the 2nd floor hall, he ducked into the 1st floor hall, and we didn't see him again. Creepiest though would have been the plastic head / cloth body baby doll, naked on a chair with fake flower petals around it and a paper hat, and a sign that said Eliza in front of it / her. We noped out of that room pretty quick once we saw what looked like blood stains on the floor around the chair. Every once in a while I'll go urban exploring with one of my friends. Usually he just checks out abandoned houses and the odd factory or two. It can be a really cool experience for anyone who is into history or photography or asbestos inhalation. Today though, he decided we're going to a local abandoned hospital, at night, with just the 2 of us, because it'll be more intense that way, and he's evidently never seen a single horror movie in his life. Despite my mild hesitations, we end up getting to this place as it's starting to get dark. We make our way in through a window that someone has torn the boarding off of, and my friend gives his usual yell throughout the building announcing his presence so we don't startle anyone else who might be inside by saying we're not the cops. We're just looking around and taking some pictures. By his logic, we're doing a courtesy to anyone else exploring the building who might panic if they heard us coming otherwise. By my logic, we're announcing our presence to every homeless person in the building who might want to steal a camera from two dumb kids. Despite my fears, nothing bad happens. We make it through the building, going through multiple floors and checking out the roof last. We get a ton of cool pictures and take a look at some of the creepiest old bathtubs and tables they left in the place. There's some really cool graffiti inside as well, mixed in with your usual shitty tags. The whole building is pitch black except for the few spots where moonlight shines through, so we literally can only see whatever we happen to be pointing our phones at the time or by using the flash on the camera. Even though I'm still worried about being murdered, I'm glad I went, and I'm less freaked out as we're making our way back to the window we came in. We get back to the room and I hop out the window first and have my buddy pass me the camera. As I take it from him and he starts climbing out the window, a soft voice from what sounds like just 10 feet or so inside the building says, "Wait." I look around my friend and can just barely see a silhouette standing in the doorway from where we entered the room. Now, I'm not proud of what happened next, but in that moment the force with which my butthole puckered propelled me away from that building with enough forward momentum to last until I was at the edge of the property back towards the road. My friend followed after me quickly, more so to laugh at me than out of fear. He didn't seem to be too worried about it, though he agreed we definitely weren't going back. I know this isn't the most exciting story, but what terrified me at the time was that I was 100% sure we were alone in that building. It was dead silent aside from us. The fact that the man waited until right as we were leaving horrified me, as it made me realize they could have been watching and following us throughout that entire building, just listening to us talk, watching us taking pictures, just following us. Needless to say, I don't do too much urban exploring anymore, at least not at night in old spooky buildings constructed prior to World War I. A few years ago, my entire sophomore class and I went for a retreat at a friend's relative's estate. We went there on a school bus after classes had ended, prepared burgers for everyone and had a fun time. After lunch, some of my friends decided to go check out the woods around the estate, and I likely would have agreed if it meant exploring nature, but that day I just couldn't for some reason. I stayed to play card games with some other friends, and then after about an hour and a half we decided to go outside again, and wait for the others so we could play Mafia or something like that while some played soccer. Being worried about their delay, I called one of the girls who went into the woods and got no answer. I started freaking out and was gathering some people to go look for them. We were about 5 minutes deep into the forest the way they had gone, until we heard a scream. We were all startled and wanted to both check it out and head back, until the girl and one of the dudes who went in came running towards us. She was crying violently, muttering out words we couldn't make out, and the dude was as confused as us. He told us they had found a cemetery and that suddenly she started screaming and ran towards the path they came from. One of the guys who went with them was still missing, and they didn't know where he was. We took them back to the house and tried to figure out what happened, but the girl was really scared and couldn't say anything while crying and shrieking. A group went back to look for the other kid, this time involving one of the moms who were watching us. They came back with nothing, and people were getting worried. We kept calling him but he didn't answer his phone, to the point where almost everyone went out looking for him. I didn't dare to go back and stayed at the house with the girl and others. She calmed down and told us what she had seen. They lost track of the missing kid early on, and then they got to the cemetery. She didn't want to stay there because she didn't want to bother the spirits, so she stayed near the path while the guy checked out the stuff that was on the other side. When she turned her head around, she saw a figure kneeling towards a gravestone with their hands covering its face. She stood up in order to leave, and as soon as she did so the figure turned around and showered her his face, described as a pale, old man with a smile from one ear to the other. Although I don't know if this part is really true, she yelled and ran towards the guy crying and started heading back to the estate. She claimed to had seen the missing kid just walking around the cemetery when she looked back, with the figure still there looking at her. They then ran as fast as they could until they met us. Half an hour later, the missing kid came back with his entire clothes and face dirty with grass and dirt. He didn't say a word and her mom took him home straight away, but claimed to not remember anything when we then talked to him. I'm not really sure what the girl saw. It was probably a local visiting a deceased relative, but that wouldn't explain her reaction and what happened to the dude that went missing. Still haunts me to this day when I think about it.